Good afternoon, or I should say good morning, for another 24 minutes, everyone. Myself and Chris Jack here, fresh from the press conference this morning to bring you press conference reaction. We're going to talk through some of the big talking points in a bit more detail. I know Derek and Adam this morning were on a little bit earlier with their reaction to some of the breaking news from the press conference. Myself and Chris, as we often do after these press conferences, are going to talk through it in a bit more detail. So, I mean, first things first, Chris, 9 o'clock press conferences. Let's hope that's not a consistent feature because that was an early one for me. I know you're an early riser, but an early one for me.
No, it kind of actually suited my morning routine. I was up and out the door and away nice and sharp. I got to training ground nice and early. Quite strange being there that early. 'Cause it's been a long time since Rangers have done these 9 o'clock pressers. The last time they were that early was actually during Gerrard's time, but they were all Zoom ones back then. So guys
Yeah.
basically rolled out their bed, brushed their teeth, did their hair, and were on the Zoom. But a long time since we've been at a training ground that early in the morning. But it gets it done. It means we've got the rest of the day to really digest it and get stuck into it. Because as ever, when the Rangers manager speaks, it's an interesting one. After the fortnight that we've had, everybody will be poring over every word and every point of it as we get back into domestic matters.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get straight into that. Chris should say that if you want to watch the press conference, you can watch it in full on our YouTube channel. You can read the full Michael Beale transcript if you prefer that as well. Tom Lawrence's press conference, you can watch that and you'll be able to read that early this afternoon, as well as some more press conference analysis from Chris. So, as ever, loads and loads of content to keep you busy and occupied up until tomorrow. Chris, let's firstly talk about that very topic. This was the first time that Michael Beale had kind of been speaking, I guess, in retrospect. He obviously spoke in the post-match Old Firm press conference, but that was right after the game. I guess, what did you think of it overall? How he responded to questions about pressure, what his general demeanour was? I thought he was pretty relaxed, quite keen. It repeated a few times that he wants to let the football do the talking, but I guess asked a number of questions about fan reaction, about job pressure. What do you make about all that to start with?
I thought he probably handled it as well as could be expected. Now, it's uncharted territory for Michael Beale because throughout his entire coaching career, he's not had to do press in terms of the volume of pressers that he's done since he became a manager. When you then come up the road back to Glasgow, it's even more intense. It's a very different media landscape up here than it is working down as QPR boss. I think overall he's handled that side of it well. It was one of the unknowns, if you like, when he came into the job. I think overall he's handled it well enough. In terms of today, it was, as I say, uncharted territory. He's never had this type of scrutiny from external, from internal factors. But I think he dealt with it fine. His answers were as expected. I don't think he was ever going to come out and say, "I feared for my job after the Old Firm game." I don't think he was going to come out and say, "I'm going to be here for the next 18 months or 2 seasons," because no, those things are both polar opposite points, and neither of them are going to be realistic ones right now. He'll be fully aware of the situation. It would be tone deaf if he wasn't aware of the noise from the press, from fans. It's impossible to escape it. All he can do is, as he said a couple of times, is win matches. If he wins
Yeah.
matches, the noise level comes down, the fans get off his back a wee bit. I think there's probably a section of the fans that no matter what Michael does, no matter what he says, I think he's probably lost a section of the support and they're now just looking for change and for somebody else to come in. I think there's still a section in the middle that he can win over. He only does that by winning games. I think that was the kind of key point. He kept stressing of looking forward. Tom Lawrence kept stressing looking forward. Ultimately, that's all they can do because the damage has been done, and it's up to the manager and the players to try and amend that as quickly as possible. Going into what, as we've said all week and over the fortnight, it's a hugely significant run of fixtures for Rangers as a team, as a club, and for Michael Beale as manager now.
Yeah, 7 games in 22 days, I think it is. Very much need some wins in amongst that. I asked what is the key to getting fans back on side who may have lost confidence in him. Beale said, I think the team needs to win games of football. We have a good opportunity to do that in front of us right now. The team needs to show rhythm in the way we are playing. The new players need to show that they are settled. They've had a long time now We've probably had over 40 sessions on the pitch, 9 games and 4 or 5 pre-season games. The players arrived at different times, but there's no excuse about it being a new team now. It also went on to say later on in the press conference, which I thought was interesting, Chris, that it's maybe taken the team a little bit longer than he anticipated to settle. I mean, there's no time now, is there? There's been 9 games already. I certainly think that the team selection hasn't helped at points, because I think especially in the front three, the inconsistency of selection maybe has worked against the rhythm and the consistency that Beale hopes for. But I guess another undertone of the press conference, and I want to actually bring up as well another quote Beale made on this. He said, "Listen, over 4 league games, we have had 21 more shots than anyone else. We've had the most passes in the final third with the most accuracy. The opportunity has been there for us to score more goals. We're underscoring in terms of what is expected, and if that changes, then things look a little bit more rosy." I think he's putting a bit of onus naturally on there as well, Chris, for his team to go and capitalise on chances, and for his players who he's back to bring in this summer to go and back him up by putting on big performances as well starting tomorrow.
Ultimately, the only numbers and the only stats that matter are the league table. You have 4 points behind Celtic after 4 games. I think when you start mentioning shots on target and shots conceded and defensive records, yes, they all feed into the bigger picture, and they perhaps give the manager and players a bit of comfort about maybe why things just haven't quite clicked for them. Ultimately, fans only care about points on the board. If they had been 4 points ahead of Celtic and you could rhyme off all those facts and figures, great, I think you can get away with it. In the position that Rangers are in, performances and the results that have come so far this season, not sure that was the best thing to flag up, because people then just say, well, you spent £13 million on strikers, why haven't you scored? Out of all the chances you've created, why haven't you scored more goals? And I think that's something that he did mention right at the start. It will be the strongest team that plays against St Johnstone. He's not going to rest players with one eye on Real Betis in midweek. But as you mentioned there, Josh, and you said in your piece the other day there, what is Rangers' best team right now? Now, we'll do our predicted lineups for the game tomorrow. I think we'll be broadly similar, because also some of the options are limited due to injuries now. But trying to find that balance and trying to build those relationships that Michael speaks about, it's only going to come through game time. And as he said, there's no excuses now. You've had your pre-season, didn't go that well, obviously. They've had enough time on the training pitch now. Michael's been at the club for a long time. A lot of the squad are still the same. These guys have been brought in, big expectations, big money in some regards. It's now time to go and deliver big performances and get results.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's move on to the bad news. Todd Cantwell is out. Now, there was some confusion as to whether it was 3 to 4 weeks or 3 to 4 games. I think if you watch the press conference, the initial diagnosis was 3 to 4 weeks, and Cantwell is partway through that. So therefore, it's now 3 to 4 games with 2 games over the course of 2 games a week for the next 2 weeks. I think I'm right in saying that, Chris. Did you pick up similar messages?
It was quite confusing, and it's an important point, because 3 and 4 games in 3 or 4 weeks are very different things right now. When you look at the schedule, if you think you'll miss this weekend, and also next midweek, probably the game at Ibrox next weekend as well, you think they could probably get through. If it becomes the longer end of the scale, both for Todd and for Kieran Dowell, if it comes to 4 weeks, there's a lot of big games coming up within a short space of time. And Rangers could do with both of them, because I think if you lose Cantwell, you naturally think that Dell's one of the players that could slot into that area of the side. You also look at the Europa League squad that came out this week, and really short of midfield options. You know, Cantwell was listed as a forward in that. There's not that many midfield options who have the skill set and who have the attributes of Cantwell and Dell. You're looking for someone with a bit more guile, bit of creativity from the middle of the park. If you lose both of them, I think there's a danger that the midfield becomes quite stodgy and a bit slow, and that's not something that Rangers need right now. They need players who are head up, who are passing, who are breaking the lines, who can chip in with goals. That's basically Todd Cantwell. It could be Kieran Dowell. We've not seen enough of that from him yet, but it's probably not going to be Lundstrom. It's not Jack. It's not really Raskin's game. Cifuentes has a mixed start and will take a bit of time. So to lose Cantwell is a huge blow. To lose Dowell on the back of that just kind of compounds that, and it does make the next couple of weeks really tricky for Rangers. So fingers crossed it was just like a bit of mixed message and mixed words from the manager, and it is only 3 and 4 games to go. Because if it's a longer term issue with both or either of them, it does cause real problems, unfortunately.
Yeah, on Cantwell, Beale was asked towards the end of the press conference, what is his problem? He said it's something with his knee picked up in the challenge towards the end of the game, the Old Firm game. He played on and we had to send him off for a scan, and we thought it would be worse than it is. The initial diagnosis, so we're probably 2 or 1.5 weeks into that, which I think confirms that the initial diagnosis 3 to 4 weeks, and they're about halfway through that. Hopefully, because I certainly think Todd Cantwell's probably Rangers' best player. Chris, I don't think you'd find I don't think there's many strong arguments for others at the moment, but I don't think you'd have too much opposition to that. Not having him over this run of fixtures, he's someone who I think always didn't have a good Old Firm game, but I think he always takes the ball in difficult situations. He obviously kind of creates that goal away in Eindhoven when the tie's still within the balance. Obviously, it wasn't towards the end of the game. He's who you want for me in a game like tomorrow. I know he didn't start away at Rugby Park, but to go back to what else Beale was speaking about, he spoke about the win percentage that Rangers had last season, and I think in mentioning those stats, he's trying to suggest that, look, if that goal isn't wrongly chopped off, and you notice he was, I think, firmer on the referee's decision today than he was after the game a couple of weeks ago, then maybe you do, although the performances aren't great, you do get the results, you do buy yourself that little bit more time, which now Rangers don't have the luxury of. They obviously need performances and results, and not having Cantwell, I don't think there's any other way to suggest it as a big blow. But it leads us on nicely to Tom Lawrence, who is back, he is fit. Interesting press conference with him, speaking a bit about his injury, the setbacks, and the frustrations that he's just kind of lived with for the last year. He says he's as fit as he effectively can be at the moment without having played many matches. He's played matches behind closed doors. Just, I guess, your reaction to what Tom Lawrence had to say, Chris, and fantastic to kind of see him back in the action, because it's the first time that he's going to be involved for a run of games since really came to the club well over a year ago now.
In terms of if you're losing Cantwell and you're losing Dowell, I dare say the good thing about Tom Lawrence coming back is the timing, because he's one guy you would think will naturally slot into that area of the side. He's a guy that can play that defence splitting pass. He's a guy that can score goals. He does offer a threat. And I know the manager has, he's repeatedly referenced Tom Lawrence throughout the summer, and every time he's talking about signings and injuries, he's always said, we've got Tom and we've got Kamal Roof still to come back in. He clearly has a lot of trust, a lot of faith in these guys in terms of what they can bring to the side and what they can produce. I think we'll really need to see both of them over the next couple of weeks. I know Michael mentioned Kamal should have had 2 and 2. I'd be surprised if he doesn't start on Saturday. I'd be surprised if Tom Lawrence doesn't start as well. I think it's a type of game where you're looking for someone that's got a bit of swagger about him as well. And I think when Tom's at his best and he's on the ball and he's trying to create, he's got that Cantwell-esque personality about him. He seems to get the club. I think he understands the demands and the pressure. I think that should actually bring out the best in him. And it's just really good to see him back. As I spoke to him up at Dingwall a couple of weeks ago, just after he made his comeback, he only got a couple of minutes that day. And I think there was just a relief about him, the fact that he'd come through. I know he referenced this in the press conference earlier on, having come through such a long, arduous process of you set yourself goals, you set these little targets, and you reach it, and there's then a setback, and you have to reset, and you work towards another one, and you then set back again. It must have been a hugely difficult 12 months or so for him. Great to see him back. Can really bring a lot to the team, and I think the fact that he is back out of all the dark clouds that are around about Ibrox these days, and him being back is certainly a silver lining in it for the manager.
Right, before we talk about our teams, because we're going to try and make one up between us for tomorrow, see how close we are. Ridvan Yilmaz, manager, also asked about that today. He's not in the Europa League squad. Obviously, just hasn't really happened for Ridvan yet for one reason or another. Beale said, Ridvan's a player I like. I think he has a bright future at the club. He ended last season ever so well, but he's not been able to knock out the games. When it comes to picking that squad with the limitations you have, he unfortunately misses out. At the time I was picking the squad, and the squad had to be submitted the first Monday of the international break, it should be said, by which point, as Beale said, Ridvan had only played 20 minutes. I thought Kieran Dowell would be out for 3 or 4 weeks. That was the feedback I was getting, and Todd Cantwell was going for a scan. I, at that point, did not know the severity of Tom's situation. I couldn't put them both in, which is why Kieran missed out. All the players have had it explained to them. I can't say they're all over the moon, but they understood the decision. Interesting that he makes the point that he thinks Ridvan can have a positive future at the club, but as we've touched on in the briefing so far, Chris, I think it's telling that he's not in the squad at the moment. I guess the issue is that, again, we've not really seen what he can do on a consistent basis in big games. But I guess the knockback would be from Beale on that is that he's not been fit enough over a sustained period of time to be in selection and be in contention for that. And this situation with the left back position kind of rumbles on. What do you make of the whole Ridvan situation in general? Because he's obviously someone that was brought to the club when Beale wasn't here. There was a different sporting director. We know how much change has been over the last number of years, the last year at Ibrox, but it's still Rangers there have quite a valuable asset in terms of the money they spent on him, in terms of his background, and it doesn't look at the moment like he's very close to being the first choice in that area.
No, it's hard to say that he's actually the second choice in that area, because you look at Dujon Sterling coming in. Also, the manager spoke about him earlier on this summer, worked with him, knows him personally, clearly had a lot of faith in him to try and bring him in this summer. Must have sold Dujon on a vision of, you're not coming up here to sit behind Tav and Borna and not only play 5-10 games in a season. Must have given him a route to first team football and said that pathway is there. So I think it becomes really difficult for Yilmaz to see how he gets himself back in the team. Of course, he has to get himself fit, has to prove that he's robust enough. And that robustness is probably his main feeling right now. We've seen him play, we've seen that he's neat and tidy, we've seen what he can do going forward. I think the flashes that we've seen, there's clearly something there, there's clearly a talent there. But if you're incapable of playing 35, 40 games a season, you're not going to be Rangers' first choice left back. And you look at the squad that's in place just now, the stalwarts of that squad, like Tav, Goldson, Barisic, obviously at left back is one of them. That was how the 55 squad was built. It was guys that could just churn out the games week after week after week, that could do Europa League on a Thursday and then go and win games on the Sunday. And if you're incapable of doing that, you don't get a jersey and you don't play every week. You find yourself a bit part player. You get 10, 15 minutes here and there. You get League Cup games or early round Scottish Cup games, but then when the big games come around, you're not in the running for them because you just don't have that. You don't have that pedigree and you don't have that track record. And it's really hard to see how Ridvan is actually going to get that over the next wee while. So Barisic, first choice left back, I think he's had a decent, solid enough start to the season. He's been fine. Doesn't deserve to be dropped. He doesn't deserve to be dropped when there's not MD chapping on the manager's door to say, I deserve to be playing. Even if Ridvan thinks he's a better left back, he just can't prove it fitness wise. So no, I think it doesn't bode well in terms of his long-term future. I know Michael may rate him as a player, but I think he's got a lot of questions to answer in terms of proving to the fans that he's going to be the next left back. Is going to be the Barisic successor. And we really need to see over the next few months a sustained run of games. He somehow has to get himself in the team and prove it over 10, 15, 20 games to show us just why Rangers spent as much money on him last summer. Otherwise, I think he's heading for an early exit and Rangers are probably heading for another loss in terms of a transfer dealing.
Let's talk about our teams. Goalkeeper, non-negotiable. Jack Butland plays there. I don't think you're going to argue about that one. The back four, for me, I guess there was a question, does it change? Does it go to a back three? Beale spoke about Ben Davies today for the first time in a while. He's fit and available. I don't expect there to be a change to a back three or any changes personnel-wise in the back four. Chris, what about you?
No, I think the back four picks itself. I know the fans will argue that there should have been another centre-half in there. I think we'd all have liked to have seen another centre-half in there, but there's not. The manager has to go with what he's got. I'd be surprised if he thinks this is the time to switch to the three. So no, I think the back four is really settled, and that's going to be your first choice for the foreseeable.
Midfield, Todd Cantwell's omission through injury changes the dynamic. I think that it will. I think you're going to see one of Ryan Jack or John Lundstrom come back in there. Wouldn't be surprised if it's Lundstrom purely because he played at Ross County away. Don't mind the thought of going something like Cifuentes, Raskin and Lawrence, but does that have enough control off the ball, especially if you're relying on those fullbacks to get high and wide? So I'm probably going to say one of Jack and Lundstrom with Raskin and on the left-hand side, Cifuentes on the right-hand side. What about you?
I'm going for the attacking option. I'm going for the
Nice.
trying to entertain the fans, score goals. With all respect to St Johnstone, they are where they are for a reason.
Yep.
Not at the start of the season. I know they had a really encouraging result for them at Parkhead a couple of weeks ago, one that Rangers then couldn't capitalise on almost a week later. But St Johnstone are where they are. I think if you go there and you don't show the right intensity and you don't show the right intent, you almost play into St Johnstone's hands. The game becomes bogged down, becomes stodgy, becomes a battle. Rangers have better players. They're technically better players with higher levels of ability. Again, with all respect to Stephen McLean's boys, just go and play your game. And the manager talks about a style. That style has to be seen over the next few weeks, and it has to start on Saturday.
Okay, front three. I think Kemar Roof probably stays in there. Again, that's where the money's been spent, so you want to maybe see more new signings in there, but I don't think anyone will argue against Roof's position in the team. I'm going to say Lammers, Roof and Danilo. Want to see more of Lammers. Hasn't really had that many consistent starts. Equally, he needs to put the chances away that he's missed so far. But Rangers are going to need someone to connect that midfield and the attack. I think there's still a question about whether there's enough pace in that front line, which is why you're going to need the forward running of Cifuentes and Raskin and Tavernier to stretch the kind of St Johnstone defence, depending on how deep they defend. I'm going to say Roof, Danilo and Lammers. What about you?
2 out of the 3, Roof, Danilo is yes. I say Roof, I think, deserves to keep his place. He's played well since he came back in. Danilo, if he doesn't start, then major questions are going to be asked about not just why the money was spent and where he is. I'd be amazed if he doesn't start. I went for Dessers just because I think the manager's put a lot of faith in him and has kept a lot of faith in him. And if you then don't start him, does that then look like he's been dropped? And it's not a punishment as such, but does it then look as if you've lost some of that faith? I think the only change, if he is looking for a bit of pace in the attack, try and stretch it a wee bit. I think that then leads you down the Matondo Sima alternative, both of whom are much of a muchness and very slimmer. I think Matondo probably gets it just on what he's shown. Maybe carries a bit more of a goal threat. So I wouldn't be completely surprised to see Matondo, but I would go for put my faith in the 2 summer signings to finally deliver and Kemar Roof just because he's the most likely man to actually get a goal.
Yeah, no, I'm quite been quietly excited about Matondo this season. I know there's not been many tangible things to get quietly excited about, but I think he looks like he's playing with a lot more confidence. For me, it's not so much. I think he has the quality. He obviously has the quality, and he has certain attributes that other players in the Rangers team don't have. Obviously, his pace, his ability to kind of carry the ball at pace. I thought if you looked at that game at Ross County away, the difference in confidence levels this time round compared to the game where he missed that one-on-one chance, you can see how important confidence is to him. We've got a piece on the website with his former coach in Belgium that was on there earlier in the week. Got lots of content from Chris, more content to come today. We'll have our predicted teams. We'll have more press conference analysis tomorrow, loads of match coverage, and on Sunday, loads of reaction to what will hopefully be a positive afternoon for Rangers in Perth. Chris will be there. We will be live tomorrow at some point after the game to dissect it in a bit more detail. Until then, thanks very much for joining us. Keep up to date with all our content on the app if you have not downloaded it yet and our social channels. Until then, we'll speak to you